Welcome back to part 2. Now it's time to disassemble our burner unit and clean it, and then after we do that, along comes the fuel tank. The burner assembly is going to need some extra tools. In addition to the ones that we had to disassemble the unit, you're going to need the following. You're going to need a pair of needle nose pliers, a 9/16 or 1/2 inch wrench to take the top off the fuel tank, depending on what kind of fuel tank it is, a 7/16 wrench, a 3/8 wrench, and a 5/16 wrench. You'll also need a pair of safety glasses, a pair of gloves, a dust mask, and the reason you need all that safety gear, you're going to need a portable drill and a wire wheel. The wire wheel can be either a brass one like this or a fine mesh steel one. If we look closer here, you can see this bigger one's brass, smaller one is fine mesh steel. Either one will do the trick. You don't want a big coarse wheel to do this, because what we're doing is just cleaning the rust off of this fiber, off of this galvanizing here. We really don't want to take the galvanizing itself off if we can. You want to keep as much of that on there as possible to avoid the rust. So use a fine wire wheel, nothing coarse. So we'll gather up your tools, come on back, and we'll get started. Alright, here we go. Set those aside for now. Here on this, first, before I do anything else, let me just tell you how this thing works. We'll look at it from the side here. This is the fuel inlet. Fuel comes in this way from the fuel tank, like so. It's heated by the flame on the generator assembly here into a hot vapor, which goes into this burner assembly. Okay? Once it's in the burner assembly, underneath here, you'll notice that there is, get it up close here, there is a hole right here. You can see it. There's a hole underneath here. That's where the air comes in and mixes with that fuel spray. So fuel comes in, air mixes with it in this chamber, and the air and fuel mixture is forced down and around and to the base of the burner, and it comes up through the burner where it burns. It also goes from the base of this primary burner through the crossover tube to the other side to the warming burner and into this section at the base here, where it's controlled by this little valve to let fuel up here into this side. So it's all the one loop coming from the fuel tank, mixes with air around, out here to get burned, and over here to get burned. It's a very simple system. That's one of the reasons why Coleman seemed to last forever. So what we're going to do is take this apart so that we can clean the burner assemblies. You'll notice there's 2 screws, 1, 2. Okay, that's all that's holding these burner assemblies together is the one screw. So we'll take this one off. Again, make sure you don't lose them. By the way, what I'm doing, I'm throwing all my stuff into one of these. This is a $3 magnetic base parts and piece holder from Harbor Freight. You'll notice that nothing falls out. Got a magnet in the bottom of it, so you can throw all your screws and stuff in there and they aren't going to get lost, hopefully. Okay, when you take the screw off, you'll come to a big washer, and underneath the washer is the burner stack. This burner stack consists of a bunch of, let's see here if you can even see it, a bunch of small, thin steel washers. There's two different kinds if you can see it. There's flat ones, and the next ones are corrugated. They're kind of wavy or crimped washers. Call them corrugated. Okay, and they alternate. There'll be a flat one, corrugated, flat one, corrugated, flat one, corrugated, flat, all the way through the stack. Underneath the stack, this is the burner cup where the flame comes out the side and then curls up to the pot that you're sitting on. And underneath that is a disc. Don't lose this disc. It's very important that you have it. To this side. Take out the screw, take off the top, again the washers, there's all our washers, and the burner cup. We'll set those aside for now. Now hold this up here. If you can look, if you look in here, you can see this is where the fuel comes in, right here. Fuel comes into this chamber and comes up towards you to the burner, and then it goes through this cross tube over here to the other side. Here on this side, fuel comes in to this point here. Here's the valve. If we open the valve up, you see this valve is nothing but a little washer here that is held on with a clip to this shaft, and it's threaded. So you close the valve, this washer pushes up against the end of the tube and shuts it off. Simple as that. Again, very simple. Very obvious engineering, but it will last forever because there's nothing there to go wrong. Okay, that's as far as you need to disassemble this. Take the burner cover, the burner assemblies off, and clean these out. You want to make sure that there's no rust in there, or as little rust as you can get away with. Take your time, use the little the gasket scraper or something, get down inside there, and scrape away as much rust as you can all the way around. These things do have a tendency to rust on the inside. It might be a little rust, it might be a lot of rust, you don't know. Won't know till you get in there. Another thing I want to show you is, let me back you out here so you can see it. These burner assemblies are two different sizes. Got a large one and a smaller one. Notice the difference? The larger one is this one. It's the primary burner. It goes right here. The smaller one is the warming burner on the side. You look at the rings are two different sizes too. Bigger ones go on the primary side, smaller ones on the warming burner side. Don't get them mixed up. You want to keep them separate. What I usually do, if I'm going to keep these for more than a few hours, I'll take this as it is, the whole stack, and take a plastic wire tie and go through here and just zip tie the thing together so that nothing can be lost. It's all in one piece. Next step is where all that safety gear comes in. Fortunately, this particular one, I'm not going to have to do much inside it. It's pretty well clean in there. I don't know who owned this stove before it got to me, but they did a pretty good job of taking care of it. I'm surprised that one in this condition is actually at a thrift store for $5. But I'm not going to complain. We'll go ahead and put on the respirator, or not the respirator, but the mask, and the safety glasses, and the gloves, and get started on it. Okay, here we go. What I want to do here is just use the wire wheel. We don't want to take it down to bare metal if we can avoid it. We just want to knock the rust off. This is what the gloves are for. If you run this wheel over and it hits you in the side of the fingers or something, let me tell you, it takes off rust really well. It takes off skin even better. So you wear the glove. And on a high-speed drill, you don't want one of these little pieces of wire breaking off and coming up and smacking you in the eye either. So make sure you wear the eye protection. So just take your time, be thorough about it, clean off everything that needs it. Everybody's case will be different. Depends on the history of your stove. It could be nice and clean like this one, or it could be a bleeding disaster. I mean, it could be completely rust-flooded. That's why I cautioned you at the beginning to inspect it first, see how much rust and nasty crap is on it, and if you don't think that you're going to spend that much effort on it, just bypass it. Sometimes it's just not worth it. You can restore anything if you want to give it enough time and money, but you have to know when to kind of say no and walk away. And it's purely your judgment call. How much effort do you want to put into it? Alright, that takes care of the main body. That's the reason it's nice and clean, ready for paint. Now comes these. We need to paint, we need to at least clean these. They aren't really rusty, so I don't think we're going to have to actually paint these parts. This will clean up nicely with the wire wheel. Oh yeah, that'll work. These parts don't need much in the way of cleaning up. Okay, one thing left to do is to clean these little rings. These things are probably the biggest rust gatherers in the whole assembly, because they're very thin steel. They have no galvanizing or anything on them to keep them from rust. They're just plain steel, and they get heated red hot and cooled down and red hot and cooled down over the years, and they just oxidize, and they'll rust to the point where they just clump into one big lump. Okay, we have a lovely little cheap 50-cent stainless steel bowl picked up at the thrift store. I use that as my surface to clean these rings on. All you need is some steel wool and a ring in the bowl, and you just sit here and just work your way around the steel ring. The idea here is not to make them nice and shiny, only to knock the rust off. The rust is your enemy, because what can happen is the rust will build up on these and it'll start clogging them. You can tell when you light the stove if the blue flame around the ring is not even. You know, it's like there's areas that are not burning and some that are burning higher than others. It's because of rust clogging up the pores, if you will, of this ring assembly. So all you got to do is just knock the rust off, both sides. Move on to the next one. That was a flat one. Here's a corrugated one. They're a little tougher. But again, the idea is not to make them nice and shiny, just get rid of the rust. There we go. Next one. Okay, when these come off the stove, there should be 3 of the corrugated ones and 4 of the flat ones in a stack. Some stoves might have 4 of the corrugated ones and 5 of the flat ones. Depends on the stove. Okay, that's how it's done. You don't need to stand here and watch me do this for the next 20 minutes. So I'll come back to you when I get on the last one and we'll continue from there. Okay, back done. Everything's sitting here, all stacked up, ready to go back together. Everything's nice and clean. The only thing we need to do now is paint. So we're going to take this over to the paint table and give it a quick coat of VHT, that's very high temperature, 1300 degree paint. And I'll catch you over there in just a second. Alright, here we go. When we paint this, we want to paint the top area here, but we don't want to get paint down on the inside. You can mask it off or stick a rag in there or whatever you want. But on me, I've done this so often, I'm just going to paint around the edges here. A little bit of overspray in there won't make any difference. So here we go. Just a light coat, that's all it takes. There we go, all done, that quick. That's all it takes, just enough to give it a seal so that it isn't going to rust anymore. So now we're going to let that dry, and then we'll move on to the fuel tank. I know I had intended to do the fuel tank and this at the same time, but the fuel tank is the area that needs the most attention on the entire stove, because that's the one that will stop the stove from working. And we'll get to that in part 3 coming up. See you there.